Let's go ahead and get to the AFC North because we're going to have a lot to say about this division. You have several of the very shortest shots to win the Super Bowl all in one division here. Of course, the Cincinnati Bengals right up there, as are the Ravens. Listen, I think the Browns are going to be much better, and I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, certainly if they play to their ceiling, could be a playoff team as well. Couple of 10.5 win totals out there. Cincinnati and Baltimore sitting at 10.5. The Browns are sitting at 9.5, and then the Steelers are sitting at 8.5 to win the division. Cincinnati 150, Baltimore 235, Cleveland at 380, and then Pittsburgh is at 450. Like I mentioned, a couple of short shots to win the whole thing as well. Bengals 11-1, Ravens 18-1. So let's start here with Cincinnati. Of course, the biggest question is Joe Burrow going to miss any time? Mike, this is one of those things where they start out Cleveland, Baltimore, and maybe they look at that and they say, you know what, listen, it's not worth running Joe out there whenever, we have a 70% Joe Burrow, 75% Joe Burrow, 80% Joe Burrow. Maybe we just take those games for whatever we can get out of them. And then we get this nice little stretch of the Rams, the Titans, and the Cardinals. And I don't know if it's out of the range of possibilities for Joe Burrow to aim to come back in week 6 against Seattle. It all just depends on how we will not know, because every body reacts differently to these calf strains, right? Like, I was talking to a buddy of mine from college who's now an orthopedic surgeon. He's like, I've seen everything from 2 weeks to 8 weeks. And he's like, I'm being dead serious when I say that. He's like, the range of how much it takes to come back from these things is very, very large. And so I don't know, man. What do you think from a Cincinnati standpoint? Do you think this is imperative to have him out there for week 1, or with Super Bowl aspirations, are you playing this a little bit more conservatively and looking at the bigger picture?
I think it's imperative to have him out there week 1. And I realize you want him to be healthy. You need him to be healthy as much of the season as possible. And that stretch, week 3 through week 5, is just so soft that there's the idea in your mind, well, we can win those games with our backup, which is probably true. But if you want to win the Super Bowl, it is so important to be the number 1 or 2 seed in the AFC. You're going to have to run the gauntlet of quarterbacks no matter what seed you are there, right? And to be able to do so at home in Cincinnati makes a massive, massive difference. This is not an easy division. Let's say they lose this division, and with the back-to-back games against the Browns and the Ravens, who are your number 2 and number 3 choices to win the division as week 1 and 2 games, those are massive, massive games for the Cincinnati Bengals teams, because let's say they end up 11-5, but the Ravens end up 12, or let's say they end up 11-6, and the Ravens end up 12-5, and the Ravens win the division. Well, now you have to go into Jacksonville, and then you have to go into Buffalo, and then you have to go into Kansas City to get to the Super Bowl. That is a really, really difficult road. Winning this division is very important for the Bengals specifically if they want to win a Super Bowl, because you need those home playoff games against the quarterbacks you're going to be facing. You
are sitting here looking, of course, a big loss in Jesse Bates leaving town. You never want to see that happen, but they do bring in Orlando Brown. And I think as far as signings go, one of the bigger ones of the offseason, because of just the fact that Joe Burrow, despite them revamping this offensive line last year, Mike, was still finding himself under pressure a lot of the time. Now, you talk to some of these guys, and they were saying, yeah, we just didn't really gel. It didn't take some time, and we weren't able to really get there. Well, they were not going to sit around and wait on these guys to gel. They bring in Orlando Brown, of course, one of the better left tackles in all of the NFL. You still have a lot of talent on that offensive line, even though they didn't play as well last year as projected. If they get kind of the upper level of the range of outcomes for this offensive line, we know how good the receivers are. We know Mixon is back and at least happy for the short term here, and we know how good Joe Burrow is. This offense should be able to score. I'm not going to say at will, but almost at will. It really just depends on what they get from the defensive side of the ball, where they have a bunch of talented guys. Lou Anarumo, I think, is a very, very, very sharp guy on the defensive side of the ball. But again, you lose your starting safety. You're going to have to start some guys that are not necessarily like up there as far as the ratings go. You're going to need that front. You're going to need that front 7 to really play well.
Yeah, you mentioned Lou Amarillo. I have more faith in the Cincinnati defense than I do the Cincinnati offensive line. Amarillo, one of the best in-game adjustment guys in the entire NFL. He was phenomenal in the second half of football games with the Cincinnati Bengals defense. So I trust that he can scheme up the talent that he has. This offensive line is the big question mark. They replaced 3 of their 5 starters last year and really didn't improve all that much. They were better from week 7 on last year than they were early in the season, but they were still a bottom 10 offensive line in the NFL. If you look at the preseason rankings here, I've seen them them anywhere from 11th all the way down to 17th. It's really all about how fast they can get this offensive line going and protecting Joe Burrow. They have all the weapons in the world. They got to keep Burrow upright. And the injury that we saw, this calf injury, is one where you don't want him scrambling, especially early in the season. So taking that time to gel is exactly what they don't have if they want to be successful long term.
Yeah, the betting market does not think that Joe Burrow is going to miss any time. It is Patrick Mahomes 7-1 to win the MVP. It is Joe Burrow 7.5 to 1 to win the MVP. You would think if it was thought that he was going to miss some time, maybe there would be some value on Burrow, but that's not the case at all. He's the second shot and just barely to Patrick Mahomes.
It makes sense. I mean, look, if you told me over the next 7 years Joe Burrow didn't win an MVP, I'd be surprised, right? So if you're looking at that flat 7-1 number and you say, well, if I get that every year and I bet it 7 years in a row, I'm at least even in that spot. The question is whether or not it's going to be this year, right? And all the pieces are there on the offensive side of the ball to put up numbers. The record is my biggest concern. A lot of times you have to have multiple things come together to win the MVP. You have to have the team success on top of the numbers. And I'm not sure you're going to see the team success from Cincinnati that you're going to need for Joe Burrow to be able to win the MVP. I would expect they need to win 13 or 14 games for him to end up with that trophy. I think that's going to be really, really difficult for this Bengals team.
Now let's take a look at the Baltimore Ravens. And we know the Lamar Jackson saga is over. He is happy. They bring in Odell Beckham to catch some passes as well. They already had one of the, better rushing attacks in all the NFL, just the way that they scheme things up. And, of course, Lamar's mobility as well. So you expect them to still be able to run the ball effectively, even though J.K. Dobbins is sitting out currently and trying to figure things out with him. You hear Lamar say he wants to pass the ball more. He doesn't want to run as much. I don't like hearing that necessarily if I'm a Ravens backer, because I think what makes this team unique, and certainly what makes Lamar Jackson is his ability to run the ball, is their ability to not have to rely on the pass as much as basically every other team in the NFL, because you have that special of a guy at quarterback. So I don't know. I mean, this is also Lamar Jackson saying this. This is not the coaching staff saying this, so take it with a grain of salt. But I certainly want Lamar saying like, no, man, I'm going to be the same me that I've always been, and we're going to go out there and we're going to win this division.
Yeah, I mean, actions speak louder than words, right, Matt? And when the rubber hits the road, Lamar Jackson will be carrying the football on 3rd and 3. I think we all know that. And when you have those situations where he's scrambling out of the pocket and there's room to run, he's going to take off because that's natural instinct. So I'm not that worried about what he is saying there. I do think it's interesting what you're going to see here with Minshew as a new offensive coordinator. I want to see Lamar Jackson under center. I want to see more bootlegs and play actions off that action. He's not run very much play action in his NFL career. That's something you're going to see in this Ravens offense. That's something I think could be a big key for him this year, because when you run play action, specifically with a quarterback that can be on the move, it really puts so much pressure on the defense, because not only do they have to react to that run, you have to still stay on the quarterback as well with one of your linebackers, and you have to have your safeties make a decision. Am I coming up to play the run? Am I coming up to play the quarterback run? Or am I going to respect these receivers running their routes? It creates more space in the running game. It creates more options for Lamar Jackson, and increases the likelihood of a mistake on the defensive side of the ball. So I'm interested to see what type of play action game we get from the Ravens this year.
Yeah, you get Odell Beckham. You already have Mark Andrews. You have Bateman. You drafted Flowers. Todd Monken comes in from Georgia. I think is going to try to take advantage of all of those playmakers out there. I really do. It's so weird that I can say this, and I think you'll know what I mean, but I'm just want to make sure that everyone is completely clear on what I'm saying here. I think I can be high on both of these teams while also saying I want absolutely nothing to do with betting these teams at all. Like, I don't want to bet the win totals. I don't want to bet anyone to win this division. Like, none of this stuff. I can think that both these teams are going to be awesome while also saying I don't want anything to do with them from a future standpoint.
This is a great situational division. When we talk about this division during the season, we're going to bet each of these teams to beat the other team multiple times with the spread, because in certain situations, you're going to see advantages for a specific squad over another one. I have no clue who's winning this division, though, so I have no interest in betting any of the futures markets, but I will be involved game by game in this division.
Mike, let's roll on here in this AFC North. Like we said, I don't want to bet 10.5 win totals on the Bengals or the Ravens. Now we get to this Browns team and we see a 9.5 total. And not only is it a 9.5 total, but if you want the over, you're actually getting some plus money if you want the over. Browns, of course, then would have to at least go 10-7 on the season to get to the over on that one. I'm kind of throwing out what we saw last year from Deshaun Watson. And now listen, I know he very well could, maybe he lost it in that time off, but it's a kind of the same deal I was talking about with Calvin Ridley, right? I mean, it wasn't like he was coming back off of injury. He was just a very long, extended layoff. And so I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt because he wasn't allowed in by the way, if you don't know the terms of the suspension, he was not allowed around any of the teammates. He was not allowed at the facility. He was not allowed any of that stuff. And so he was really and truly kind of coming in cold off of a year and a half of being out of the game. I expect a much different Deshaun Watson this year. And I think with that, this Browns team has some upside.
Yeah, I do too. The pieces are all in place here. You got an elite defensive line. They've got a bunch of first-round draft picks at the cornerback positions in the secondary. You got multiple weapons on the outside. You've got the best running back in the game, and Nick Chubb, one of the top 5 offensive lines in the NFL. So it really was just trying to figure out this quarterback position, and they paid a lot to get Deshaun Watson here. I would expect you're going to see a very, very different quarterback than what you saw toward the end of last season. And this is an interesting early slate here for this Cleveland Browns team. They start out with Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, then they have Tennessee at home, and then they have to play Baltimore. So 3 of the first 4 weeks they're playing division games against a tough division. If they're able to get through that stretch, there's a part of this schedule that gets very, very easy. After playing San Francisco, they've got Indianapolis, Arizona, they've got Denver, they've got the Rams, they've got the Jaguars, the Bears, they've got the Texans. Like, the back half of this schedule is very beatable for this Rams team. I like the over 9.5 here. And I think if you want to play an in-division play, this is one of those where you send yourself a bookmark right after that week 6 game against San Francisco, see what the division odds are, because they're about to go through a stretch after that that's exceptionally weak.
And if you look here, if you want something else to be bullish about this Browns team, I mean, if you look at this offensive line, Jedrick Wills, Joel Bitonio, Ethan Pocic, you got Wyatt Teller, and then Jack Conklin. Outside of what the Eagles are going to be rolling out, I mean, that is arguably the best offensive line in the NFL. And so you're going to have Deshaun Watson with some time to throw the ball as well. And then if you look, it's kind of sneaky good skill position stuff that I think we might see even a little bit better this year. David Njoku, of course, kind of had a rebound season last year. You mentioned Chubb, the best running back in the game. We know Amari Cooper's awesome. That trade for Elijah Moore, you keep hearing from the camp, and I know everyone's great in camp, but you hear from these beat reporters, they're kind of like, man, this guy is now doing those things in which we thought he was going to be able to do coming out of college. You're seeing that electric guy. You are seeing the guy that once he gets the ball in his hands is going to really be frustrating for some defenses. And so I think Elijah Moore is pretty interesting. And then look, now you have the Donovan Peoples-Jones. If you do have a good Elijah Moore, it should at least free him up for some of those bombs down the field and stuff. And Deshaun Watson, of course, going to be much more accurate throwing those balls than anybody that's been throwing to Donovan Peoples-Jones. And so I think the upside for this offense is like top 10 unit, and maybe like the ceiling for this offense is maybe even like top 5 or 6.
Yeah, the offense has all the pieces to be electric here. And that's something you're consistently seeing in this division is the defense here is exceptional as well, too. I think the Zadarius Smith acquisition is going to be very important for them. He's going to play the opposite defensive end, opposite of Myles Garrett. They were trying to find a way to free up Myles Garrett, in some way get him not double-teamed every single play. Zadarius Smith may actually be the guy who is able to force some teams to single up Myles Garrett. And if so, he could have a phenomenal season there. The edge pass rushing from this team is just off the charts. Maybe the best 1-2 combination in the NFL. So I like the defensive side of the ball for Cleveland here as well. And that offense, like you said, their ceiling is top 5. I would expect they're going to be top 10, but they could end up in that top 5 range if everything clicks here with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, signed Dalvin Tomlinson as well for that defensive line. So, I mean, there's a lot of good pieces here for this Browns team. In our NFL guide, which, by the way, you can get if you go to VSiN.com and you become a subscriber, you can read in there. I actually have this team as a playoff team. Not winning the division. I put them as a wild card team, but I have 3 teams coming out of this division, Mike. I mean, I really do. I think that all 3 of these top teams are all going to be double-digit win teams. I know it's crazy to think that that's going to actually play out, but I think this Browns team, 10-7, certainly well within the range of possibilities here. And I think the Ravens are good, and I think the Bengals are good. I think all 3 of them make the playoffs.
You've got a favorable schedule of facing the NFC or the AFC South here, which is the weakest division in the AFC, and then you also get the NFC North, which is another division that is beatable here. So you're getting 8 games against those 2 divisions for all 4 of these teams. You'd expect you're going to see some pretty good records for all these teams. They're going to beat each other up inside a division, but the outside division games are very winnable for them. I wouldn't be shocked if you see 3 playoff teams come out of here. You'd expect it's just going to be Jacksonville. You're probably going to get 2 from the AFC East. Maybe 1 or 2 from the AFC West, and the rest is going to be filled out here from the AFC North.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bear case here is obviously Deshaun Watson in that time off lost it, right? I mean, like, this is something to, if you if you remember back, and I know it seems like forever ago, but when Deshaun Watson was out on the field consistently, Mike, this was a guy that was in the same conversation, when we were talking like, okay, let's name your top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, Deshaun Watson's name was coming up whenever you were making that list. And so it seems like forever ago, but it really wasn't all that long ago. And if he even gets remotely close to where he was when we were kind of having those conversations a few seasons ago, then I think this Browns team is a playoff team.
Well, if you do the dance right now of who your top 5 quarterbacks are in the NFL, Deshaun Watson's not going to make that list. But if you asked who could possibly be a top 5 quarterback at the end of the season, he's on the short list of people that could jump into that top 5. And that gives the Browns a different dimension than a lot of different teams.
A team that I like that I'm not as bullish on as the top 3, though, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if you take a look at this team again, on paper, pretty talented. I mean, like, really everywhere you look, we know that Deontay Johnson is going to be a good possession receiver for you. We've seen what Pickens can do down the field. I mean, the guy just wins 50-50 balls like crazy. You bring in Allen Robinson. I don't know what's left in the tank there, but the good thing is he's your third option. I mean, like, now Allen Robinson doesn't have to be Allen Robinson of 5 years ago. Allen Robinson can be your third option, and that's a pretty good third option. Got Freiermuth at tight end, and of course we know Najee Harris. It's really look at Kenny Pickett, and can he make a step forward? Can he make that bigger leap to where this team is not like looked at as, you know what, they're going to be a tough out, but I don't really take them seriously, to, oh no, Kenny Pickett's playing good football. And Mike, this team is no longer just an annoying team. This team's for real.
Yeah, Kenny Pickett was one of the surprises for me last year. I didn't think he was going to be that good coming out of college, and he impressed me. I thought that he did a very good job of distributing the football, learning the offense. He was in rhythm. His passes were accurate. So I'm interested to see what he can do and if he can make a second-year jump here. And I like what they did with the offense. You mentioned, Devontae Johnson is your number 1, very solid there. George Pickens, he could be a one on a lot of teams if he takes a step forward. Having Allen Robinson as your slot receiver is awesome. You've got Najee Harris here, who's a good running back. He needs to run hard, but he's a good running back. You flip over to the defensive side and you look at what they did last year, giving up less than 20 points a game from week 12 on. You've got TJ Watt, who's a perennial shot at someone to be able to win the defensive player of the year. Mika Fitzpatrick looks good there. I like the Joey Porter Jr. draft pick at cornerback as well. This is arguably your best defense in this really tough division, and the offense isn't bad. So I could see Pittsburgh making some noise this year.
Yeah, Patrick Peterson signing a little bit under the radar as well, but look, if you go by PFF grades, still stuff left in the tank there for Patrick Peterson, right? And so now you have him out there as well, so with some veteran leadership on the defensive side. So I don't know if I can get there to yes, this team's going to win the division. I don't think I can get there with that. I could talk myself into any of the other 3 teams. I don't think I can get there with the Steelers. That being said, there is a world too where I do think that this team could be a playoff team as well. And maybe it's the Browns aren't as good as we think. Maybe Deshaun Watson is washed. And so with that being the case, that it's the Steelers that actually come out of this division. But man, they are going to be a team everybody hates playing every week. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, this is going to be one of those that you may want to fade the team they're playing the next week, because it's going to be one of those black and blue type games where it's going to be tough. This is a division where if you can find games where these teams are going out of division and you have a division game before and after, so you're playing a division sandwich, I might be interested in fading these teams in that middle game where they're playing outside of the division, because you're going to play a tough game beforehand. You're going to be focused on that game afterward. That middle game could get overlooked. So we'll have to see in season what the lines look like. I agree with you. 4.5 to 1, not enough for me to bet the division win. I need something around the 6 to 1, 7 to 1 range if I was interested in playing Pittsburgh to win the division. I do think they're a playoff contender, but they need some things to break right for them to be able to get in that position.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.